he? Talk, or I'll crush every bone in your body. Where is he? Where? Thank you.
The dynamic duo is back once again, but regardless, welcome back, true believers and all you DC fans out there, to a very exciting video where I am once again partnering up with my good old amazing YouTube pal of Slcmof, which if you aren't subscribed to him, you definitely should, especially if you are excited for all these upcoming Marvel and DC games, because we are going to be talking about every single one of them in full detail within this video, or more specifically, exactly what the differences and possible similarities are when comparing these two gaming companies of Marvel games as well as Warner Brothers games and their current production pipeline, as well as the direction that each of these studios are taking with their massive AAA superhero titles.
Thank you for having me. I always love doing these videos with you and collabing whenever we get the chance to do it. So I'm excited for this topic in particular because of kind of the differences between our audience and sort of our unique perspectives on each of these topics. So I'm excited to jump into it.
So just to give you all a better perspective on what exactly we're dealing with here when it does come to Marvel and DC, is that each of these companies are taking a vastly different direction when it does come to producing various projects, as well as what type of projects we can expect from them down the line. So, specifically for the case of Marvel games, we recently saw the massively successful release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 coming from Insomniac Games, and their upcoming title with Marvel's Wolverine. Now, on the other side of things, we also have this brand new EA partnership with Marvel games, starting off with Iron Man and Black Panther, which I am very excited for the Iron Man game, which if you haven't seen any of those videos about that title, I definitely recommend that you check them out. And we also know that we're dealing with an upcoming Captain America and Black Panther game developed by Skydance New Media, which is going to be set in World War II, which if you are unaware, is actually being led by the creator of the Uncharted games. And knowing full well how talented she is, Amy Hennig specifically, I definitely think it's safe to say that we are in for a very special treat when it comes to this project. Most recently, at the Game Awards last year, we did receive a brand new announcement of an upcoming AAA Blade game currently in development by Arcane Leon and published by Bethesda. Now, while I'm personally a bit hesitant about this project since I don't fully trust Bethesda all that much, it still is very cool to see that Marvel games in particular is giving all of these different IPs to various gaming studios to allow them to pour their creative talent into each of these individual heroes and provide them with their own unique experiences that they fully deserve. And on the flip side of this, we do have Warner Brothers games, and specifically DC, dealing with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is in development by Rocksteady Studios, famously known for the Arkham games, which is set to release next month in February, and a Wonder Woman game, which I'm personally very excited for, currently in development by Monolith Studios, who are best known for the Shadow of War games within the Lord of the Rings universe. And that's pretty much it on the side of DC compared to all the other projects that is in development by Marvel. So, for you, Slcmof, what do you currently think about the state of all these superhero games when looking at Marvel and DC's vision for how they're dealing with actually producing and publishing these experiences?
Well, I think Marvel's doing a great job, and particularly with Insomniac sort of being the anchor point for all of the universe that they're creating. That sort of started with Spider-Man in 2018. They did the Miles Morales sequel, which I thought was excellent. And Spider-Man 2 was really, really solid as well. And then from there, as you mentioned, all these other games, Blade, Iron Man, Black Panther. So, you have an entire franchise being built, sort of similar to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just in the gaming universe. And this is something that DC has struggled with in their films and their video games. Ironically, I think there's a lot of parallels with the fact that Marvel, they already have the blueprint from the Marvel Cinematic Universe to what a video game universe can look like. And that doesn't mean that all these games have to be canon to one another, but it does mean that they're doing a great job at building out their sort of phases and layers of their video game universe. And you contrast that with DC, which, after Batman Arkham Knight in 2015, they had a tremendous opportunity, which was to build the Arkhamverse and to take those first 4 games and build upon them. And so from there, you could have done a Superman game, a Flash game, just in the same way that Marvel is doing with Iron Man, Blade, Black Panther, etc. But instead, DC's approach has been to really not make many games at all, and to basically go silent for 10 years and then release Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And I made this point. I tweeted on a community post on YouTube, and I shared this. I said, DC could never have this many games in development, with pictures of all the games that you shared. They'd rather drop one game a decade. So I posted this to my community post, and I got destroyed by my viewers. Like, they all were ratioing me. And, you know, to one extent I understand, because they perceived it as me saying, or almost like taking the pro Marvel side, which wasn't really my perspective on it. My perspective was more saying, like, DC, do you not recognize all the opportunities that you have in front of you? Do you not recognize that after the Arkham games, you had a blueprint to scale like one of the best video game universes ever? You know, Arkham was such a phenomenal starting point to get into Superman and Flash and Justice League and all these other characters and make spin-off games. And they could have utilized WB Montreal and Monolith and Rocksteady, which, yes, they are doing, but I also think that they need more games in development and more titles that don't take 10 years to develop. Because look, you know, I understand the quality versus quantity argument. I think that's important to consider and something we have to keep an eye on with Marvel making so many games. But honestly, are we going to lie to ourselves and say that Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League and Gotham Knights took 10 years because of the quality versus quantity argument? Like, to me, that doesn't hold up. And the face value of just looking at the games doesn't suggest that that is the case. Now, again, if they had spent 10 years, if Rocksteady had spent 10 years making like the best Superman game ever, and it's just amazing, and it blows the Arkham games out of the water, okay, you can make that argument. But I don't think that we can say WB Montreal taking, 9 years waiting for Gotham Knights. I don't think you can make the quality versus quantity argument as it pertains to DC games versus Marvel games in this case. You know, people were really taking out of context my post and thinking that I was like, quote unquote, shilling for Marvel, which is kind of the opposite. I mean, people that know me know that the DC video game universe is what I've built my channel on, and it's what I'm the most invested in sort of perpetuating and promoting and things like that. But at the same point, I can't promote it if there's nothing to promote. And that, you know, we have a game coming out, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Wonder Woman, that was announced, and sure, they're developing it, but we haven't heard anything about it. I really have no clue what's going to happen next with the DC video game universe. But the broader point that I was trying to make with my initial post that got a lot of backlash is not that one game franchise is doing better than another, quote unquote. I'm more just saying that Marvel is highlighting the missed opportunities that DC has. Marvel making these spin-off solo games really shows what DC's missing out on. And it's amazing that DC owns these iconic characters, Superman, Flash, Justice League, Teen Titans, whatever. And they're not utilizing them in gaming. And, you know, I just don't understand why after the Arkham games, you wouldn't then build a DC video game universe in the same way that Marvel's doing. So I really commend them for that. And frankly, I'm jealous, and I wish that DC was doing the same thing. And as you mentioned, I'm excited to play all these games. I can't wait to play Black Panther, Blade, Iron Man is going to be phenomenal. So I'm really, really excited for all of those games. And frankly, I'm just a little sad that DC is not doing the same thing and really, really taking advantage of the IP that they have in their repertoire.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's not necessarily about pitting these two studios against each other, because everyone wants great superhero games, both on the Marvel and DC side, and I specifically would love to see Suicide Squad flourish and actually be a game that I would enjoy playing, especially considering the letdown that we got with Marvel's Avengers. It would be awesome if we could see Suicide Squad kind of one-up that game and actually do that type of live service superhero experience, but in a more engaging way. And in that way, everyone would win, especially diehard Arkham fans and these people who are genuinely looking forward to what the gameplay structure of that experience is shaping up to be in so many different ways that would actually provide WB Games and DC with the benefit of the doubt in thinking, oh, this game is going to be that great, and oh, in reality, it's actually fantastic, or one of the best superhero games you've ever played. But the fact of the matter is that it seems like all of these games are going to follow that similar blueprint, and I would love to get your insights on this, Kobe, because as we know, is that James Gunn is currently the head of DC in all areas, not just for films and shows, but also he's leading the charge now from the gaming side of things. And recently, there's been two separate statements from both James Gunn and our favorite man of all time, David Zaslav, saying that James specifically wants to seemingly connect these video games from DC with the other plans he has going forward with the shows and the films, and try and seemingly intertwine them with the stories that they're telling in these live action or animated projects and thoroughly connect them directly into a storyline that could be incorporated into a video game. And David Zaslav also said that he wants more live service experiences to be added into the DC gaming pipeline, or not just DC, the WB gaming pipeline with all their current franchises that they have at their disposal, because they believe that is what would make them the most amount of profit possible, when in reality, it's actually the exact opposite. As another comparison, like we recently saw with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 being a simple, story-driven, single-player AAA experience, that is now currently the fastest-selling PlayStation game in PlayStation Studios history. And it didn't have to incorporate any type of live service microtransactions or always online gameplay elements. It was just a simple narrative-focused game that you could play whenever you felt like on your own terms. And because of that, it also ended up selling over 5 million copies in less than 11 days. It's really odd to see the viewpoint and the focus that DC and WB are taking with their properties in comparison to Marvel, and specifically the head of Marvel Games himself, Bill Roseman, has gone on record several times saying that what they want to do is bring the best out of these characters through the developers that they're working with. So they're giving Blade to Arcane Leon, they're giving Black Panther and Iron Man to EA, they're giving Spider-Man and Wolverine to Insomniac, and they're allowing the developers to make the game that they want to make with those characters, to give them an honorable experience that does justice to who they are. You wouldn't give a racing game to Insomniac to apply that to Spider-Man. You wouldn't give a Dance Dance Revolution-esque game to Captain America and Black Panther set in World War II, right? You would give...
Oh, that would be an interesting mod.
That would be a very interesting mod, but it just shows that the developers are giving the characters the experience that best tailor fit them and their stories. So the reason why a Marvel's Avengers is such a benign game on so many levels is because the live service structure does not fit those characters. It doesn't do justice to the character or the stories that embody them front and center. And that is my current issue with Suicide Squad, in thinking that it's going to fall into a similar trap. And at least Wonder Woman, we know it's going to be a different case. We know that's going to be single player, story-driven, AAA, open world, action-adventure. Awesome. I think that's the perfect direction to take for not just Wonder Woman, but as we've kind of discussed in previous videos, that Arkham formula of what we've seen with the Arkham games and now currently with Insomniac Spider-Man games, single player, story-driven, third-person, action-adventure, possibly open world, is the best possible route to take when dealing with these characters. And now seeing that we might get the opposite of that, with only live service games being applied to these characters for DC, is going to be a very problematic issue that I don't believe WB Games is ready to face.
Well, you make a great point, and here's the other thing that I really think about and want to contemplate is that in a world that makes sense, you know, Sefton Hill, sort of the mastermind behind Rocksteady, he recently ended up leaving. And I think a big part of it is because the two things you mentioned. One, the DC Games brand is being led by people who not only don't play video games, don't seem to know anything about them, particularly David Zaslav, but even James Gunn, I don't think is like known as, he might play video games, I don't know, but he's not somebody who has experience doing this. You know, in a world that makes sense, they would have taken somebody like Sefton Hill and promoted him to being the head of DC Games and being in an architect position of crafting the phases of the DC game universe, just like we saw in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that's what I would have done probably if I were in their position. But again, I don't think that James Gunn or David Zaslav know how to lead a successful video game universe. And when you look at what David Zaslav is looking at in terms of revenue, you know, he's thinking about it as, well, he's seeing the spreadsheets of how much Call of Duty makes on Warzone and how much Grand Theft Auto makes through GTA Online. And they're like, well, let's just make those games. Like, GTA Online was so profitable because of the post-purchase revenue, DLC, expansion packs, in-game purchases, things like that. Same thing with Call of Duty, same thing with a lot of other franchises. But what he fails to understand is that that is not the core of what makes superhero video games successful. Every time superhero video games have tried this online post-release revenue sort of model, it fails. It has failed consistently every time it's been attempted. compare that to what the two most successful video game franchises in the superhero video game universe and world is the Insomniac Spider-Man series and the Batman Arkham games in terms of sales and just overall critical acclaim success. In recent times, you could go back to the early 2000s with some Spider-Man games, but in recent times, those are the two most successful franchises. And what do they have in common? They have in common a compelling, phenomenal single-player story, and they are really focused on the narrative. And there is some DLC opportunities and some post-purchase revenue opportunities with skins and some DLC packs and things like that. But broadly speaking, it's focused on the single-player story. And that is what they don't get, is that they're trying to compare apples to oranges. They're trying to say, well, GTA makes all this money through GTA Online. Why can't we do that? Why can't we do that with Suicide Squad? And it's just not going to work. And so that's what kind of happens when the person in charge or the people in charge of the DC Games universe don't know what's happening. And they don't have success doing this in the past. They don't have any track record of doing this, and they don't know how to do it, frankly. So that's the unfortunate situation that DC Games is in, is that the people in charge kind of don't know what they're doing. The movie side, David Zaslav and Gunn, they have experience doing movies. So I wouldn't say that they don't know how to do that part of it, although I guess the recent releases all bombing at the box office maybe suggest otherwise. But we'll give them a chance to make their own movies, and right now they've just been trying to market the movies that have been made in the past, but they've been failing spectacularly at that. The games, that's like an undisputed fact. They don't know what they're doing with games. Like that's transparently obvious. And it's also just been a turmoil situation at WB with all these regimes that have been coming in and out every 5 years, and the company's been getting sold, all these people. It's just been a disaster in terms of management, and there hasn't been the consistency of one person in charge to actually oversee a project that takes 10 years. So there hasn't been that leadership as well over the universe. But again, the DC Games universe, if they were smart, they would appoint what I kind of label like the Kevin Feige of the DC Games sort of ecosystem. If they're smart, they reapproach Sefton Hill and try to bring him back to do that role and put him in charge and just say, Sefton, whatever you think is best with these games, just start to greenlight studios and get games in production and oversee that pipeline. But as long as they're trying to chase the dollars of the massive multiplayer online, DLC, looter shooter model, they're just going to continue to fail until they, I guess, just decide that they want to make a Grand Theft Auto or a Call of Duty game and compete with those franchises, which is its own challenge. But they're definitely not going to be able to do it in the DC Games realm.
They definitely need their own individual creative vision and focus and direction to actually take these characters in a way that would not only do justice to their own individual characters and their stories, but also, of course, for the consumers and the fans who want games from these characters to be on that same level or type of genuine experience like we've gotten from Marvel. Everyone would totally freak out. We see it every single day that people want a single-player, open-world, AAA story-driven Superman game, or Flash, or Green Lantern, or any of the individual Justice League members. Imagine an open-world Aquaman game in Atlantis. That'd be insane, and a totally story-driven experience based in that world for that character, dedicated with his own combat system, form of traversal, everything like that. That's what the people want, and not having these games fall under the similar structure of what we're currently seeing with Suicide Squad. Because if every game ends up feeling like this live service, always needing to grind experience, what are they going to do to make them feel different from one another? They're all going to end up feeling exactly the same, and that is what we don't want from DC or their characters.
Here's another point about this, is that you're exactly right. And all these games that have successful post-purchase revenue models, whether it be Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, whatever, is that they all have PvP and PvE dynamics. So you're playing against AI and bots to grind. Destiny, let's take Destiny as an example as well. All those franchises, yes, there is the looter shooter grind aspects where you're grinding to get loot and grinding to get things and various things like that to keep you on the game. But then you take it to a PvP and you're playing against other players. Destiny, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, they all have that dynamic. Marvel's Avengers, Suicide Squad game, they all are going to fail in that regard because there's no PvP dynamic. It's only PvE. It's only killing AI and bots, and it gets boring after a while. I mean, Marvel's Avengers, I was bored out of my mind like 1 weekend just shooting those robots. I mean, how many robots can I hit with Thor's hammer over and over and over and over again before I just go insane? And I was like losing my mind playing that game and trying to level up. And Marvel's, I'm sorry, but Suicide Squad game is going to be the exact same thing. After you play the story, what am I going to do? Just get in with my friends and just shoot those Brainiac bots over and over and over again? And there's no time where it's a PvP. Now, if it was some sort of PvP dynamic, okay, maybe that would work, but I guess that doesn't really work with this type of game anyway. Let's think about the Arkham games, and let's think about the Insomniac Spider-Man games. That both of those franchises took a lot of creative risks. Like the way Doc Ock was portrayed in Spider-Man 1, completely revolutionary and different. That was a completely new take on the character. You take a look at Batman Arkham City, they literally killed the Joker. Like what? WB would never do that. I mean, they need the money to keep Joker in all these movies, right? And so when they have to be canon to the universe, then all of a sudden, like if the Arkham games had to be canon to the Dark Knight trilogy, whatever, then like, oh, we can't kill the Joker because he has to be, you know what I'm saying? Like you're beholden to the movies and what the directors want to do. And then the game, the creators, the game creators have to service the directors. They have to service the movie universe. And in reality, the game should service the games. They should service the fans of the games and the games themselves. And I think that when you have to be canon to the movies, it sort of sabotages the game directors.
No, I am in 1,000,000% agreement with you. Even our fellow online buddy IronGen, we did a video about this exact topic with David Zaslav's vision of trying to make not only every game live service, but also James Gunn adding on top of that they want to make each game canon and connected and interwoven with the other projects in works at DC for movies, films, shows, whatever, is a absolute shot in the foot if I've ever seen one. It makes zero sense, and it also limits the creative freedom that we can get from these games. In fact, one of my favorite recent Marvel games, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, not only is one of my all-time favorite Marvel games because of the story that was told in that game and how phenomenal it was and how different it was from the Guardians films, but it also ended up winning Best Narrative at the Game Awards 2021 because of the story it told and its own unique vision, without it being connected to anything that was going on in the MCU or the other projects that are within the games and the films and the shows and the animated series and so on. It's its own thing, as it should be. Even with Marvel's Spider-Man in those games, Doc Ock was phenomenal, Tinkerer was an interesting villain for Miles within his own game, and Venom is obviously not Eddie Brock like what we see in the Tom Hardy films because it's different, unique, and separated from everything else going on, and that allows creativity and freedom and also innovation to be applied for each of these games and the companies that are working on them. If everything is instead being made to fit what's going on in one single universe, that not only limits the creativity and genuine authenticity that can be incorporated into these games and their stories, but it's only going to make the players less interested because we want new things. We want new stories, new narratives, and new takes on these characters that we haven't seen before. And if they're only going to be locked to one singular vision, then that's only going to limit and hurt the portrayals of these characters that we could end up seeing from these individual games, especially for the series like the Arkham games. That's pretty much one of my all-time favorite versions of Batman ever, on top of the 90s animated series and Batman Beyond. Those games are fantastic because of the type of Batman that Rocksteady made for their own universe. Instead, if it followed the formula of whatever the Ben Affleck Batman was doing in the DCEU, I would be far less interested because it's not that compelling of a character, and their own take on where the stories can go would have to be restricted to what is dictated by the films and the shows. So I think it's a terrible decision for them to do, and it just shows that people want new takes and new twists and new types of stories to be told in different mediums. A gamer is not a movie watcher, and a movie watcher is not a gamer. They may not want to watch a film just to understand the story of playing the game, and vice versa. They just want to experience a story that's new and fresh and not have to be focused on several different types of things just to comprehend what's going on in the one thing that they're focused on at the time.
I agree. And again, this is what happens when you put people that don't know anything about games in charge of an entire game franchise, a multi-$100 million, billion-dollar, I don't know, however much money it is, game franchise. It's kind of like hiring a plumber to fix your car. I mean, I'm not saying that a plumber knows nothing about fixing a car, but it's not their expertise. And that's the same thing as putting David Zaslav in charge of the DC Games universe. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And so, you know, at one point, yes, he's in charge because he's the CEO of the whole company. Okay, sure, he's in charge to that extent, but why would he not in that situation hire somebody to put over the game's universe and then let that person tell him what the game franchise should look like and what it should be. And the fact of it is that the Arkham franchise and Insomniac and all that, like, they've proven that you can make single player games that are very, very profitable and very successful. And the other thing about these games is Batman Arkham Knight, people are still buying that every day. The Insomniac Spider-Man 2018, people still buy that every single day and play that every day for the first time, the first experience playing it. These games have staying power because they're so good and so quality. That is a sort of post-purchase revenue, post-launch revenue. And they don't view it in that way because they want monthly recurring revenue. Everything's about getting monthly recurring revenue, like Netflix gets and all these other companies where your card is billed every month, and they want you buying crypto points or whatever, the stupid online currencies that they have. But the reality of it is, like, Arkham Knight and Spider-Man 1 and all these games, they still generate a quote unquote sort of passive income for these companies. And they don't view it in that way, but they really should. And so my point being is, how many people are buying Marvel's Avengers? Like, how many people are still buying that game? Not very many, because it's so oriented on the post-purchase revenue. Whereas if you make a solid, phenomenal single-player story game, I mean, they just relaunched the Arkham trilogy on Switch, and it became one of the best-selling games on Switch because and the game barely even works because it's so laggy. Arkham Knight is anyway. And so that's just a testament to the fact that the staying power of the single-player games, in my estimation, is quite a bit larger than many of these massive multiplayer online games, these games as a service games, these live action games, all these sort of things. These games can have a lot of staying power, but they just don't, again, the DC Games universe is being led by people that don't know anything about this topic, and they can only really look at spreadsheets and what other industry experts are telling them, but they're not able to grasp the nuances between the DC Games universe and Grand Theft Auto or Destiny and these other franchises, and how they are so very different, and trying to incorporate the same model that other games have utilized into their business isn't going to work as easily as they think it will. But they're going to have to learn that lesson the hard way, I suppose, unfortunately. Just to sort of recap all my thoughts on this, what we're witnessing is a huge missed opportunity from the DC Games franchise. And, if we're really just at this pace where we're getting one Rocksteady game per decade, that's really unfortunate. And, I don't know what the DC Games franchise needs to do to sort of remedy that. Again, I guess that's kind of what I laid out, of hiring somebody in charge of the universe to help scale it, and getting some other developers involved. And I totally get the quality versus quantity argument. I'm not suggesting that Rocksteady just pump out a game every year. Okay, I understand that's not feasible, and that would require too much crunch time and hiring too many people and all these sort of things. But at the same point, if you were to tell me that after the release of Arkham Knight, we would get one game in this universe over a 10-year span, and it's going to be a Suicide Squad game, and there's really no look in sight as to any potentiality of getting Flash or Superman or Green Lantern or Green Arrow, I would tell you 10 years ago, if you had told me that, I would be a little disappointed. And I think most fans would be. So I think they've really kind of squandered an amazing opportunity to build a phenomenal games universe on the DC side. And Marvel is kind of the exact opposite, in the sense of, after Insomniac's success in 2018 with Spider-Man, they recognize, like, hey, we can really build on this. We can introduce Wolverine into this universe. And so then you have the opportunity for the Insomniac Wolverine to meet the Insomniac Spider-Man. That would be a really cool cameo or opportunity for Peter Parker to show up in that game, or something like that. And not saying they'll go in that direction, I don't know, but that would be really interesting if they did. And contrast that again with DC, which is, what is their plan? What is the phase 2 after the Arkhamverse? We don't really know, and that's something I would love to see them kind of correct in the next year or two, and really recognize how much potential there is in this franchise.
But until that time comes, everybody, that is the video that Slcmof and I both have for you today, and let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about the current situation pertaining to Marvel and DC games? Who do you think currently has the better games, and which games would you like to see from each of these companies in the long run? Of course, would you want a Superman game, Aquaman game? I desperately still want a Fantastic Four game, or any other property that you could think of turned into a video game. Let us know all your thoughts. And Slcmof, again, thank you so much for joining me. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day, guys.
And until next time, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Stay merry, Marvelites, and stay awesome, DC fans. Peace out.